One of the big tests for me is, do they admit when they've made a mistake, and do they admit when they don't know something? That's a lot of points on that scorecard. Because once you trust someone to tell you when they don't know or they're uncertain, you can trust them. That drives trust way up. If you tell me you know something and you've told me before when you didn't, I can rely on that information.
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities. Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Today, we are joined by a very dear mentor of mine, a friend also, but, has been a mentor for pushing 2 decades now. He was one of my first trainers and inspirational sources, along with his lovely wife, Mardell, on project management. He is the founding member and consulting project manager with the Catalysis Group based in Sacramento. Today, we're joined by Payson Hall. Payson, what's up?
Hey, Lee, it has been 3 decades, you puppy.
You're right. It has been 3 decades. My oldest son just turned 25, and I realized that on the day he was born, I was 25. So I sent him that photo and was like, hey, man, you're at that halfway mark, right? Where your kid is half your age, and it just goes down from there. So definitely feeling it. But Payson, you were a trainer mentor for me in my early years. You've trained, probably a couple hundred of folks that, I've had the privilege of leading over the years. We've referred each other business. Today, I'm really looking forward to talking about speaking truth to power. And I've seen you be able to do that with panache, with delicacy, with candor and respect, particularly delivering unpopular facts to upper management. So that is one of your many, many superpowers I would like to tap into today. But before we jump into that, as much as I know about you, we got to tell a little bit of our listeners about your backstory. So Payson, tell us about when you were a puppy and getting started in this business. What were some of the formative experiences that led you to have this ability to handle these situations with grace?
Okay, well, I'm going to start real early, but we'll do the fast trip. So we're not going to do the half-hour intro. I think one of the most interesting things I did when I was a puppy was I was a door-to-door salesman for a couple of summers. And the only thing that I learned from that is sometimes when they close the door in your face, you don't have to feel bad about it. Just they don't need what you're selling, or they don't have time for you today. So that was
Yeah,
actually
that's
that was
reframing
pretty
that
useful.
rejection. Yeah, exactly. No does not mean you're, and I think there's like this fear, and I think it comes from our ancestry, whereas if you got booted off the tribe, you were going to go out in the wilderness and die, right? It's like, you guys, that hasn't been the case for about 3 million years. So like, if somebody's saying no to you, it's not instant death.
It does hurt though. You got to build up those calluses.
Yeah, you got to do a few reps because the DNA is like, but you could die this time. You got to be ready for that. You might starve, end up destitute in a ditch, homeless and alone. And you're like, or maybe I just go to the next door, right? So yeah, that door-to-door experience, yeah, very,
I was
very,
like 15 or 16, but it was very formative. I was a waiter for a little bit, and there you learn that the better you treat people, the better it tends to flow back to you. If you're a snotty waiter and you're slow or you don't get the order right, your tips tend to not be as good. So your recompense being somewhat proportional to the quality of the service you deliver. That was my
yeah, and not in a linear always fashion, but definitely in a correlated fashion. And I loved how it was. It's that instant feedback. You're like, yep, I completely screwballed that one. Like there is no delay in that feedback.
So I ended up, for a variety of reasons, I ended up enlisting in 1977, and I was an Army Ranger. And one of the formative experiences I had as an Army Ranger was I'm leading my first patrol. It's a training patrol. They're kicking the tires, figuring out if I know which end is up, right? I'd been through all the infantry training and the airborne training, and I was relatively new to battalion. And I was in Georgia. And so I'm navigating a night patrol through the swamps of Georgia. And if you've ever seen a military map, it shows elevations there is no elevation difference in a swamp. I mean, you're doing 10-foot variance in about a 30 square mile radius, right? So when we didn't have GPS,
A hill could be a bump or an alligator's back. That's, you can't tell the difference. I went to high school outside of the Okefenokee Swamp, so I get you there, brother.
absolutely. So you got a map and a compass. I'm trying to lead this patrol, and I'm really trying to show my stuff, right? So I'm routing my team. We're trying to go around the deep water and go around the bushes, and we've been traveling for about 2 hours. And the senior sergeant stops the patrol, and he comes over and says, "Gets out a red filter flashlight, military map." He says, "Ranger Hall, where are we right now?" And I'm terrified. I mean, I know where we started. I know our approximate speed, and I know how to do algebra, so I've got to guess about where we are. I put I try to be really confident, take my finger with my glove on, and I put it on the map, and I'm covering a space the size of a nickel, probably. I said, "I think we're right about here." And he looks at me, he reaches over to a Georgia pine tree and picks up a pine needle. He says, "No, Ranger Hall, I want to know exactly where we are right now." And I'm feeling like a fraud, I said, I had to, I sheepishly admit, I'm not really sure. I think we're right about here.
I don't have that level of confidence, right? Yeah.
Well, but first I came out of the gate. I think we're right here with my fat finger on the map, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he turned me and he was not balling me up, but he was being no nonsense. He says, "Two things I don't ever want to have to tell you again. If you don't know where you are, say so. And use a pine needle and expect your troops to do the same. It helps to identify people who are confused or aren't on the same page." And so he used a pine needle. He showed me where we were. I was about a mile off. And he said, he pointed out, he said, "When you go around obstacles, you tend to go counterclockwise, and that tends to degrade you're degrading to the right of the path." And he showed me some other stuff about swamp navigation, which won't be relevant to any of you. But
You never know. You never know, right? Mm. Rangers lead the way, even in the swamp, right?
to be an expert, what you start learning is because the water levels rise and fall, the vegetation is actually a hint about very minor elevation changes. But
Mhm.
using a pine needle, he shows me where I was. He points out the changes in the vegetation. He tells me I tend to go counterclockwise around obstacles. And and later on, when I kind of had a context, this is a great lesson, but it's one of those things that you reflect on it and you learn more. Our culture values decisive behavior, and egos sometimes encourage decisiveness when it isn't appropriate or doesn't serve us, right?
Confusing. I think you taught me this, and I see now where you get your 3-point estimates from, because it's like I'm not going to use a pine needle. I'm going to use 3 pine needles. I'm going to triangulate the difference, right? But the difference between precision and accuracy, Payson, right? I like, we are right here, and you're like, that is very precise, right? And you're off by about a country. Like, so being accurate and precision are related but totally different things, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that early on, what he taught me is you want to be honest about your uncertainty, right? First, it demonstrates you're wise enough to admit where your assumptions might be wrong. It shows you're open to other perspectives and invites discussion, right? If I think we're right here, if you got a different opinion, that's
Yeah.
going to tease it out. If I say,
But then show me your opinion with your pine needle, right? Like, it's like, okay, we've got 3 pins in this thing now. Okay, that we might now triangulate within that, or we favor this one over that one, or what's the risk if we're wrong, right? A whole set of conversations can come up where the fat glove one would have just suppressed all of that.
well, and as a leader, the important thing is it models behavior from it models the behavior you want from your team, right? So my common theme is if I worked for you and I was confused or I didn't think something was going to happen, when do you want to know? And the answer is always, well, you'd want to know right now so you could intervene. It might be that you need to fire me.
As soon as you realized it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So an example of applying that, I was,
Well,
I was,
hold on 1 second, Payson. I just want to anchor, because we're going to talk about tools and techniques in a little bit, but let's just hit that one now. You taught me to invite that conversation early on in any role you are. you're a junior call center rep and you've got some kind of, crazy, insane boss that doesn't care about nothing. You still do this. You're a project manager with a sponsor. You're a consultant and you've got a client. You've got a wife and your husband, right? Like in every one of those relationships, I think it was part of the hamburger talk. I remember you used to say it was like if my commitment is to helping us be successful. If I see or have reason to believe that there are risks, impediments, or challenges along the way, when would you want me to let you know? That was what I took from my Sergeant Payson, and that has stuck with me to this day. So I just wanted you said it kind of fast. I want all the listeners to hear that. And the time to ask that question is when, Payson.
Uh, Early and often.
Yes, and then even all right. So now I'm coming to you, right? Hey, Sergeant Hall. Remember that time you said you wanted me to tell you right away? I'd like to remind you of that before I say the next thing.
Exactly. Well, basically, it gets back to the golden rule: treat others the way you'd want to be treated. If you're a leader, you'd want to know promptly. Sometimes you got to remind leaders of that because you come in and you're delivering bad news. If you launch a project, you're my boss, and you launch a project, Lee. You launched it because you assumed it was doable and within some reasonable time with some reasonable budget, and you'd have a quality output. Now we're down into the weeds. We may have discovered stuff you don't know. We may, there might have been an earthquake or one of our suppliers has gone offline. Whatever's happened, you need to know promptly so you can decide if it still makes business sense to continue.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, and that is operating with trust. That's operating with respect, and that's operating with the intel as it becomes available. So, excellent. Well, that was a good juicy one right out of the bag. So maybe one more sprinkling of the journey from there in the swamps of Georgia to being the revered project management wise man in the Sacramento region.
I have several more rakes I need to step on, but I'll try to keep it brief. When I got out of the Army, I was pursuing my degree in computer science before I went in, and I was pursuing it after. And I got a job with an insurance company, and I was doing disk management down in the guts of the universe, tinkering with the table of contents on disks and stuff. And I did the functional equivalent of jettisoning the wheels of an aircraft in flight. So we had a production system that was up, and I screwed up the wrong disk, and it was a journaling disk. Everything was going to be fine until they shut it down, and it was going to break, and they were going to lose, 1,000 person days worth of data. And so it's one of those things, when you lock your keys in the car and you slam it, you're going, no, and everything. So yeah, I mushed the key and it was like, no, stop. And I hit the key and the system's running fine. When they shut it down at the end of the day, it's going to break.
So it's you pulled the pin, you can't put it back in. It's a delayed grenade, but it's now inevitable. Yeah.
I'm a young dad. I'm really loving this job, but I've only been there for a couple of years. I went running into my boss's office. I said, "Oh my God, Mel, I just broke it." And I'm breathless. I'm just freaking out. And he says, "Stop. Never come to me with a problem until you've thought about it. Go back to your office, breathe through your nose, spend 5 minutes sorting this out, then get your butt back here and tell me what's going on, and we'll see if we can fix it." And that was an amazing piece of advice. Think about the difference there between don't come into a problem until you've thought about it, which is excellent, and don't come with a problem unless you have a solution, which says if you're really
You will
confused,
bury and suppress that and too late. So again, you're finding that happy medium between let me know as soon as possible after you've given it a heartbeat of thought. You don't have to have the answer. You don't have to have the root cause, but just take a moment to be like, yeah, what am I telling you about this? Right. So you're not just, spazzing out.
get past the panic so you can provide context. And it turned out there was some magic that we did that solved the problem, but I was not able to come up with
You
that.
weren't privy to that at the time, right? Like, hey, if you didn't you know that Alt Y F7 3 would just put it all back together, man?
What we did was cheat. We copied the table of contents from last night's backup and overlaid it.
There you go. There's always something you can do to at least mitigate it. So good. Another good rake. Listeners, here's what's great about it is, and we've said this on many, many episodes, is we talked about how our failures, our missteps, our tragedies are indeed the sources of our talents and our skills. The good neat thing about Payson is he screwed up so royally so many times, it makes him eminently qualified to teach us. So go for it, Payson. What was the next step of
Well,
this journey?
you know what they say, Lee, experience is what you get when you don't get what you wanted. So, I ended up, being on the systems programming team, and it was great. So the system we were doing this massive systems programming, operating system migration over about 18 months. And I was the low man on the totem pole. I was working with some really smart people, and the conversion went well. And the head of IT realized he built this absolutely stellar systems programming team that now had no challenges ahead of it. So they started farming us out as consultants. And I get to make my first consulting errors, in a very safe environment.
That's a great laboratory to incubate in. Yeah.
Um, so the short version is I worked for a startup that crashed, cashed out with $200. Not all startups make you millionaires.
And those were $1980.
1980, yeah,
And if you
1985.
bought gold at that time, today's value would be
I'd be a much happier man.
yeah, yeah.
Then I went to work briefly for Price Waterhouse. Learned something important there for project management. The short version is, um, Price Waterhouse, I learned a lot about the business of consulting. And one of the things they were fanatics about is they wanted to make sure they had a good statement of work or charter, and they were fanatics about change management. And one of the tips that they gave us was early in a project, find a change.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like we're
And I
doing
want to qualify when you're saying change management, you're talking about like scope or agreement change management, not technology change management like production environment, and not organizational change management. It's that like, hey, we have an agreement. How do we agree to change the agreement? Right.
Exactly. Thanks for that clarification. Yes, not org change management, we're talking about project change management, or definition change management. And so the example would be, you retain me as a consultant. We're in the honeymoon phase. Everybody's happy. We're doing the kickoff. And the day before the kickoff, you say, "Oh, Payson, I forgot to tell you, but unleashing leaders, we have our tradition is we've got this shade of blue that we use. It's in our logo. And when we do the briefing tomorrow, I'd like you to have a binder that is in that shade of blue." And what I learned from my friends at Price Waterhouse is write up a change order, bring it to you, and you write it up saying, the contract did not specify binder color. Customer wants blue binders. Cost 1 cup of coffee. Schedule impact 0. Walk it into your office. We both laugh, make you sign it, and make you buy me the cup of coffee. And what we did in a completely painless way is let you know we're serious about change management. And there's a process we're going to use because sometimes it's not going to be free and sometimes it's going to affect the
It's not going to
schedule.
be easy, and there are going to be trade-offs. Yeah.
Because it's tempting, you want to make it's, "Oh, well, this is just a little change. This is just this minor change, this one little thing." And suddenly they start to add up. And now you ask for something big and I lay the change management process on you. And suddenly, don't you love me anymore? Why, why are we jumping through this drill?
Yeah.
So I was at Price Waterhouse for 6 months before IBM fished my resume out of the trash and brought me in. And that, that was a huge takeaway.
And that's all about, to me, that goes back to the larger category of just managing expectations. So as a leader, how are you bounding your expectations with your team? How are you manage expectations with the leaders that you're a member of the team on? And so much of, I mean, we literally have a session going on in parallel right now. I'm going to join in about 10 minutes with another team going over how do we set clear expectations, and then how do we communicate when those expectations need to, as on the natural change. So you're describing it in a contract perspective. I just want folks to be like, well, yeah, it's like, no. You can do that verbally in micro relationships over micro adjustments so that we're saying like, hey, we are still aligned.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I'm a big fan of written definitions, not because I'm anal retentive, but because
Well, you are that too, but that's for entirely different reasons.
if you and I talk about a party, right, and we sketch out what we want to do for a party, when we separate, you don't stop thinking about it. We didn't mention balloons, but you're thinking, "Oh, yeah, and balloons would be cool.
Well,
Oh, and the
obviously,
music would be
isn't
nice."
that included in any party? I mean, and the clowns, you got to have the clowns.
Right. And so humans are constantly thinking about stuff. I heard a software nerd, my background's mostly software. I heard a software nerd make a terrifying suggestion. He was a data guy. Capers-Jones, and he had longitudinal data for like 30 years on IT projects. And he said, based on his research, requirements change at a rate of about 2% per month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's 25% a year.
Year, yeah, yeah. And that's the average. That's the average. And that was over 30 years. Given how things have accelerated, I would bet if he did a looking at the last 6 months, it's like they rot at, and I call it requirement rot, right? Like, it's like everything decays. It's like it's probably about 278% every 15 minutes.
Well, but what we have to do is it's not that we don't want change to happen. We just want to make sure it's a
You want to
conscious choice,
invite it in a structured way. Yeah.
right? And we want to make sure it doesn't undermine the business case,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So when I left IBM, I was at IBM for 4 years, had a great time there, worked with wonderful people. And at one point, IBM had, in their history, had never done layoffs. And the short version is I was a pioneer in image management on the West Coast. It's a little bit ahead of everybody else. So when we finished our West Coast project, they sent me to the East Coast to help New York write a proposal. And they treated me like royalty. This is one of the only times I've been met at the airport with a car.
Oh,
And,
wow. Yeah.
they treated me wonderfully, but they worked me like 8 out of 9 days I was there. I was working full time. I came home. My wife had been juggling the kids, and she's kind of grumpy because I was telling her all these tall tales. They go, the car, it was great. They were treating me like
It's
royalty.
like, nice for you, jerk.
I went into the office, and IBM said, "We've never done layoffs in the past. We don't want to do them now, but if we gave you $10,000, would you leave?" And I thought, you guys are paying me about $25 an hour. You were charging $300 an hour for my time when I was in New York.
Mm-hmm.
You just offered to fund my startup. Bye.
Yep.
And so in 1991, I started my own consulting company. And my wife joined me in 93, and we incorporated. That's what Catalysis Group is. And I've been causing trouble since. So there's
Outstanding.
brief
That
history.
is, well, no, that planted some really valuable seeds for the things we're going to talk about here next. But you've always had an entrepreneurial bent. It was just, that navigation to be able like, yes, there it is. And at a great time. So well played, good sir. Well played. Even in those formative years, and then in the 91, so that's going on 45 years since, not to date you too bad there, brother. But one of the things that we were going to look at today is that moment, whether it's because of a change or maybe because it's circumstances, that moment where you're like, I got some information. It's probably not what everybody would want to have happen right now or be aware that's happening. And you're trying to communicate it. And there's so many forces, to your point, ego, shoot the messenger. We could list probably 50 reasons why people would not share that information, right? They're just like, nope, just don't do it. Right. And then there's ways of sharing it that would be terrible to do, right? Where you're just like, running it with your hair on fire and, the sky is falling, nobody listens to you either. So you're like, well, I'm doomed if I share it. I'm doomed if I don't share it. And what I've seen done, Payson, is kind of found a way to kind of weave that line so that you can elevate the information, in a timely fashion and in a beneficial fashion that is less likely to get you shot and is more likely to inform a healthy decision. No guarantees, like the tips we talked about. So could you frame that particular scenario? You have a great experience that I was hoping you would share here with,
Let me talk about
what
two
does that
different
setup
examples.
look like?
Let me give you two different examples. One, let's go back to the pine needles. I was consulting with an organization that does hardware and software, and they had a new device, a peripheral they're coming out with as a mouse, right? And so I came in, and they said, we think things are going good, but we want you to take a look and sniff around and see what's happening. And so I arrived in March, and this product's supposed to ship in June. And I'm talking with it. There's a hardware development group, the software that has to build the driver, the guys that have to make the paper box, the guys that have to do the instructions, the guys in manufacturing. All these guys care about this project. And the project's expected to ship in June. And so I asked the hardware team, when are you going to release to manufacturing the final specifications? They said June. I asked the software team, when are you going to have the golden disk? They said June. I asked the documentation team, when are you going to have the final documentation ready for reproduction? June. I asked the manufacturing team, when's manufacturing going to start? June. I asked the distribution team, when are you going to have 100,000 units ready to ship? And they said June. And so I got out the pine needle.
It,
And in this case,
isn't that black box where they say, and then a miracle occurs? It's on every project schedule. It comes built in now. That's just like just you just it's a plug and play component. It's like, and then a miracle occurs.
well, here was the killer question, is the pine needle question. When in June?
When in June, yeah.
I got all the liars in one room. And I said, hey guys, when in June is this going to be done? And the hardware and software teams cheerfully said, oh, we're going to have all our stuff done by June 30. And then the chaos erupted. Manufacturer guys are going, no, if I'm going to have 100 units at the end of June, I need everything, all the specifications nailed down June 1st.
Yeah, it's the classic project schedule convergence, right? It's those damn merges that just jackknife you.
Well, June is not a date. When in June is actually a really good question. So that's one of the things I managed to put in my kit bag, and that's a really good question. Oh, this has to ship in June. When in June? What date? Well, we aren't sure. Okay, so you don't really know when this is going to happen. You've got a desire, but you don't have a schedule.
Yeah, exactly. That's hopium. And hope is absolutely essential. It's just not sufficient for a plan. The movie Phenomenon with John Travolta, that had a friend of mine, Elizabeth Nunziata, was actually in one of her big screen productions. Hey, Elizabeth, if you're listening. But in Phenomenon, there's a scene. It just showed up in a reel the other day, and somebody's asking if somebody's born in this year, in this year, how old are they? And he's like, he starts asking questions like, well, is he still alive? Right. Is what month was he born? What day, what time zone? Right. He's like, because it's different, right? If you're asking for, and the irony is that the other actor opposite John Travolta is the same actor that played Data in Star Trek, right? So so he's getting all flustered, and then he's like, oh well, given all of those variables, I could tell you it's 23 years, 8 months, 16 hours. And he's like, but if he's in Shanghai, that's different than if he was in New York, right? So it was, but that's just it kind of, now you can get carried away with that level of precision. That can also be very annoying. But if you are depending on a convergence of factors, precision matters.
Absolutely. Well, and the thing that we talked about before that I wanted to share, I had a marvelous.
So that's a setup, right? Like, so you see this coming. So now you're the guy that has to say, all of these liars have finally revealed themselves. Now what are we going to do about June? So we'll set that aside as a setup. Let's do this next one as another setup, and then we'll show like, yeah, well, okay, great. I've been in that problem before. I know that. How do I not die there, Payson?
Right. Well, so the other tale that I wanted to share was a consulting gig I had probably 30 years ago now. A friend of mine called and said it was a financial company. It was growing really fast, and he said, "I need you to come help me. We're in the middle of some chaos. Come help me." So I show up, and he says, "I need you to go to this meeting. I'm supposed to go to the meeting. I'm going to be elsewhere. Go to the meeting, listen, and have a gather data and let me know what you hear." So I show up at this meeting. The company was growing so fast that it was not uncommon for new executives to show up. So I show up in my suit, I sit down, they don't do introductions, no one in the room knows who I am. And so I'm listening to this meeting, and what was going on is they were on the verge of an acquisition. And the meeting was about whether or not they could be prepared for the acquisition at like 90 days ahead, right? In 90 days, can we be ready to devour these
Why
guys?
is it always 90 days, Payson? I've never figured that out. Every deadline is about 90 days from now. I don't know.
Exactly. Well, so the meeting's being run by a sales exec, and I've got no beef against sales execs, but many of them have the same kind of approach to problem solving. Identify a barrier, see if we can get past it, right? Why don't you want to buy this? Oh, you don't have the money right now. We'll do a payment plan, right? That's kind of how sales guys
overcoming objectives.
overcoming objections. Exactly. So this meeting was run by a sales guy. He was high speed, and clearly he had the troops in the room a little intimidated. And so they're talking about the various pieces of things that need to happen. And in about half an hour, they've boiled it down to there's two things that need to happen to pull this off.
Critical path, right? Yeah.
Right? Two things need to happen. One, they had to get this very specialized server constructed on site and set up in 90 days. I personally knew that was damn near impossible. Right? It was a very precious and a unique resource. The other thing is they needed to get a high-speed telecom line, and this is the '90s when that was a challenge.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
90 day, that
yeah. It's not a Starlink pitch that I throw. Like, I'm cool. I've got my backpack and my eye speed. I'm good to go. Yeah. It was a T1 line, I think you had mentioned. I think it was,
yeah, I think it was T1.
yeah. Which would
Okay, so
which would barely stream a text message nowadays, right?
yeah, I think it was like, it was at 10 megabit? I
Yeah.
think T1 was 10 megabit maybe? So anyway, what emerges is that they got to get the specialized server procured, installed, set up, and they've got to get this high-speed line. In the room are the server guy and the network guy. So they're seated. The exec running the meeting is standing in this I think it was a U-shaped conference room. So he's kind of looming over them. He looms over the server guy and says, "So the only two sticking points are the server and the network. Can you do it?" The guy's kind of terrified. He goes, "I'll do my best." And the sales guy, "Good." He
Like,
turns to the network guy and
that'll buy you a painting in an auction. I'm good. I'll close that deal.
he looms over the other guy. He goes, "Okay, so our last remaining barrier is the network. Can you do it?" And the network guy says, "I'll do my best." He says, "Okay, let's go." This is like a $10 million deal. He says, "Okay, so I think we're on track. And I haven't said anything in this meeting. No one knows who I am." I said, "Can I ask a couple of questions?" And he said, "Sure." I turned to that server. First, I turned to the server guy. And he is when I turn him, I said, "I got a couple questions for you." And he
He's
is
like,
terrified.
man, screw you. What are you doing to me,
He's
man?
terrified. I said, "How likely is it that in 90 days you can get that server procured? You got to buy it, you got to get it here, you got to set it. How likely is it you can do that in 90 days?" And he just got this look of terror on his face. I said, "What do you figure, 50-50 shot?" And they gave him an out. He goes, "Yeah, 50-50 shot." Great. So I turned to the network guy who's going, "No, no, don't look at me. Don't look at me." It says, "How likely is it you can get that T1 line installed, up and flying in 90 days?" And he had an out now. Yeah, 50-50 shot. So I turned to the executive. I said, "Okay, I'm going to toss 2 quarters. If they both come up heads, you're good. But 75% of the time, this ain't going to happen." And the conversation completely shifted, right? It's just, again, it kind of gets back to that pine needle. How confident are you that this is really going to happen? And so the meaning I made from that, and just to rehash what we said before, is, hey, they needed to know right then, even if you was going to be disappointed, because you're going to be way more disappointed in 90 days having made a bunch of promises and spent $10 million.
When you're least well equipped and you have the least amount of calendar time left to be able to do anything about it, right? And you could say, well, but you didn't know. And it's like, well, quantify or at least disclose the uncertainty, the range of ambiguity that's there versus present a level of precision, binary yes, that is just not true. I
I
mean,
love the way you said that, because you said quantify or own the ambiguity or the uncertainty. Because we can't, I can't always tell you, "Oh, yeah, this is 78% likely to happen." But I can say it's likely to happen unless it rains or there's a change in interest rates, right? That's hopeful.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. These are the things that could knock us out. And then, so pausing here, I want to look at it from two sides now. So one is, what do you do as the messenger in that case, right? To be able to elevate that. I think there was also a lesson for, you talked about the sales leader that was driving it. It was like he was signaling, this is the answer I want to hear right now. And then that does not make it safe for the team to communicate. So I think a lesson, if you are in the higher paid position in that situation, I won't call it leadership, because we all know titles and leadership are not necessarily correlated, but if you are choosing to lead and you're in a higher level authority position, to be able to invite that versus like going, guys, we're all dependent, we all die, what do you say? And you're like, well, what do I say? Versus saying, hey, I want to know now, what is the level of risk we're all collectively taking on? So inviting that during the task assignment, I think is a responsible and effective thing for the person in charge to do. If they don't, the responsible and ethical thing to do as a leader who is in the junior authority position is this thing we're going to talk about next. So I want to say there's two sides to that, in either case, there's an opportunity for you to be more effective as a leader.
Absolutely. And we have to own that this can be culturally and socially really awkward.
Yeah.
If everyone in the room is lined up and you're gonna throw sand in the gears, that can be a really uncomfortable position. And there's two sides to this, like you said. A leader has to make it acceptable to raise issues, right? And the troops have to feel confident. And one of the things that'll really screw things up is if the organization has a reputation for shooting the messenger. No, everybody listens. There's nobody listening to this is going to say, "Well, I'd never shoot the." Everybody's going to say, "I would never shoot the messenger." So let me tell you a short story about how I shot the messenger. Right, it's another rake I stepped on that I learned from. So I was working on a project at IBM. I'd left the startup. I'm working on this project at IBM, and we landed this gig, and we needed to staff up. And the startup finished cratering. I left because I saw the trajectories. It's like a year later. The startup craters. I reached in and I grabbed 5 people I've worked with for years and pull them in to work on this project. It was brilliant. We didn't have to do that norming, forming, performing thing, norming, storming thing. We could finish each other's sentences. We could joke. We knew each other really well. And so we had this great casual atmosphere, and we added staff, and I didn't change my behavior. And so what ended up happening was, some arbitrary Monday, I had the big office, right? My cubicle walls were slightly higher. And some young lady who I didn't even know came into my office and said, "Did you hear that the testing that was supposed to happen on Saturday?" We had some automated testing, was supposed to run all day Saturday. She said, "The server went down and we didn't do this testing on Saturday." And I said something really poetic like, "Damn!" And she thought I was mad at her.
Yeah.
And was completely oblivious.
Yeah,
I
because
said,
you're operating with the cultural norm and the trust bank account. You're not
"Yeah."
with those other players, and she's like, "I don't have that yet." Yeah.
Yes.
Payson,
So what
it's entirely possible I may have done that literally last Thursday, by the way. So, but please continue.
Well, I lucked out because she scurried around and I heard her because it was cubicle. I heard her tell someone, "Don't talk to Payson. He's in a really bad mood right now." And I thought,
Yeah,
I just shot the messenger. It wasn't my intention. I
yeah,
chased after her. She said, "No, no, no, no. I needed to know that. Thank you for delivering the message. It was disappointing and I really needed to know. Thank
yeah.
you." And then I got a lesson about, when you're as you start moving your way up the chain in leadership,
Mhm.
your casual remarks, your frustration can have a disproportionate
Yeah,
impact on
yeah.
the rookie troops that don't know you.
They don't know you. Well, I mean, I run into this even when I'm on like a call with a contact support person trying to troubleshoot, an insurance problem or whatever. And it's just, I'm like, hey, listen, I want to be really clear. I am not frustrated at you. You are my best chance at help here. And so I appreciate you. I am sharing my frustration, my experience because I'm letting you know so you can help me. Please don't feel like I'm doing that. I've had so many people just be like, thank you. You're my 900th call today, and I want to stick myself in the eye with an ice pick. And I was just like, hey, look, just, even with it, if it's a singular transaction, now, does that mean I always do it? No, I mean, you lose your cool and you get frustrated and you pipe off, but yeah, don't shoot the messenger. Now, I'll say the flip side of that is, so that will get people to avoid raising an issue. I also see cultures that worship problems. And everybody gets hailed if they point out a problem. So you have a meeting and you now have 15 people telling you all the ways this thing is doomed and never doesn't stand a chance. And that kind of rowdy, rambunctious, just negative ninja, like that's celebrated. And so now you're like, okay, well now the messengers have taken over, and you're like, well, I wouldn't leave the house if I listened to all of you, right? So sharing it as like just a dump and run. Yeah, this will never work. We're screwed. And then being like, don't say nothing because I'm going to get shot. Those two extremes, neither are healthy.
Right. Well, from a project management perspective, I like to manage the naysayers with risk management,
There you
right?
go. Yes,
Help me
absolutely.
understand
So
what are the
it's
things
easier
that
to
are
handle. I
working.
would agree. It's easier to handle those and convert them than the ones that didn't say anything. But still, you're like, guys, come on, you got
Yeah.
to communicate it. But like, what can we do about that? So tell us a little bit about. So okay, you've laid out a couple of scenarios. We can all relate to them. schedule convergence, multiple parties, undisclosed dependencies, just stuff that happened and you just happen to be the one there that when it happened, those are all the factors that go into it. So when you are like, okay, I'm about to share, like you had the cojones and the wherewithal to do that, probability assessment with the financial services company you talked about. What are some things that a leader in that situation, say in the next week, and they're like, okay, as you prepare to deliver this or you prepare to elevate this, what are some of the elements that go into a successful elevation?
Um, First off, my preference, particularly if I have to deliver bad news, is to do it one-on-one for a couple of
Yes.
reasons.
Yes.
Uh,
Remove the political social stuff, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
get the social stuff out of the way. So if I got to deliver bad news to you, first, you may get an unhappy face. I'm a big boy and I can handle that. If it's a large room full of people, it can broadcast a different message, right? Oh, Payson made the boss grumpy or Payson's in the doghouse. One-on-one, I can deliver bad news. You can be unhappy. You can vent. I'm a big boy. I can take it. No one else has to know that happened. And then we can move on to how do we deal with this? So one of the pieces of project management judo that I try to teach younger project managers I'm working with is when you have to deliver bad news. So I have to come to you and say, yeah, I know you wanted this on August 1st, but it's looking more like September 1st, and you get grumpy. It's like, if I should have my artifacts, I should have a schedule. I should be able to explain why. You say, okay, here's why. And then I can pivot because you got a bunch of pent up energy because you're frustrated. And if I can give you a way to focus that energy constructively, we both win. So it's like, is there someone you love and trust who's familiar with this? Maybe get a second opinion. Maybe we're missing something, right? And you say, yes, I'd like you to walk through this with Mary Sue. Great. I bring Mary Sue in. We can look at this piece. She might have some ideas I didn't think of. I win.
Yeah.
I ask
Well,
for
that
help.
that goes
You win.
back to the table of context, right? You're like, oh gosh, and you're like, well, let's see. There might be somebody that can see a different angle here, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
The other side of that is Mary Sue comes in. Now we go back arm in arm and go, nope, this dog won't hunt. Now you've had a chance to cool down and you got a second opinion, that I'm not just shining you on. It's not necessarily a matter of my competence, right? There's actually, some people will think of this later, so I want to address it. What if Mary Sue is insane? So the problem is we need to have a baby. We have no pregnant women on on the project, and we've only got a month to do it. And Mary Sue said, "Well, just put 9 women on the job." Exactly. So the only fallback position I have there is when I go to you and say, Mary Sue has some very interesting ideas about this. Can I get her assigned to the project to help me with this part?
Mhm.
I won't call that a win. We'll call that a draw.
That's a draw. Yeah. So asking for who else has perspective, that's an ingredient. Doing it one-on-one first, so that there can be that initial reaction and it doesn't have as much of a collateral damage effect, right? Great. Great data. Yeah. Like, hey, here's and if you're uncertain, because you don't have a crystal ball. If that was the case, that $200 you got back then would have been invested in the right companies at the right time. We wouldn't be having this conversation. But now, how do you use numbers to quantify uncertainty? You're like, hey, look, it could be this, it could be this. Let's look at the ranges here, right? Versus,
Oh,
yes, it will happen. No, it won't, because I don't have that kind of crystal ball.
well, I'll spare you the math of 3-point estimates. That's something we talked about over
You you
coffee
and
and
I
a
you and I
napkin.
can geek on that. We've done multiple
Yeah,
seminars over the years. Yeah, that's a whole other, white paper we'll share. Hmm.
right. So what's helpful is if there are critical assumptions to success, documenting them and reviewing them with an executive, right? So I can get the server if AT&T can get the thing installed in 45 days. Historically, they have never done that.
Their average is 970. Their best case
Exactly.
scenario was 200.
Right? We know the server's impacted. The last 3 we bought took 180 days. If I assume I can get it in 45 days, we're good. So documenting your assumptions about what has to go right to make it happen, and they don't all have to be outlandish, right? One of the things that crushes a bunch of both of our clients when they have to get contracts signed, they have to go through legal, right? And so, legal might promise you 2 weeks turnaround on a contract. and you got to do 5 iterations, that's 10 weeks. So I can go to an executive and say, look, legal's promised me 5-week turnaround. Historically, or 2-week turnaround. Historically, they need 5 or 6 iterations. Next 10 weeks, can you strong arm them? Maybe get a lawyer onto the team. Can you strong arm them to give me 1-week turnaround? Here's some actions you can take to help me address these
There
assumptions
you go. And that,
to help
so
resolve the problem.
So I want to name that one. So you talk about the assumptions, like what are the critical assumptions that would lead us to being on this end of the spectrum or that end of the spectrum, and then options, right? Hey, here are things we could do, right? And so what is fascinating about all those things, again, the one-on-one, the bringing the data, getting a second, getting alternative perspectives for alternate views. But then when you get to the point where you have the options, that's a way that all that energy can now be channeled. And to me, it reflects one of our company's core values of freedom. Is like, I'm all about protecting and enabling your ability to choose. But if I can give you better choices, if I can give you better options in that, and that you have better information on which of those doors is likely to have a more desirable outcome, then the value of that. What happens is people compare to, well, that hypothetical, mythical parallel universe that was never going to happen versus what I got, and I'm mad, right? I'm like going, that was never going to happen. We just didn't realize it at the time. But if I can manage the comparison to say, well, it could be this or it could be worse. Do you like the better option? Then the value you added as a leader is from the bad option to the better option. Because that perfect option, that ship sailed, man. That's gone.
Yeah. Well, Steve McConnell wrote a book called, I think, Code Complete. And one of these he talked about was the cone of uncertainty. When we start a project, right, there's a huge variance from what actual, how long is this going to take? Your estimate could be off by a factor of 4, right? As time passes, we get more and more certain, but it doesn't mean more and more certain that it's going to meet your needs. We get more and more certain about when it's really going to happen. Right? It's when we're eating cold pizza, drinking warm soda, the future is usually a pretty pristine place. Then you get halfway in and okay. So it's really a discovery process. And I think that's one of the useful things to prime an exec with. It's like, we just launched the project. Okay, boss, right now we're in the honeymoon phase. You're happy. I'm happy. We think this is doable. We are going to hit some speed bumps. There's going to be some construction that we have to reroute around. We might even be in a fender bender. So I promise I will keep you informed as we make these discoveries so that you can help me figure out how to overcome them or maybe change the definition of the project to still support your business needs.
Yeah. And those things that you're describing, Payson, I just those are called working norms or team norms or working agreements, whatever you call it. And it's like, I agree that when I have this situation, the antecedent, I'm going to do this thing, this behavior, and then that's going to cause this consequence. We'll be better prepared. Right. So I will let you know when I see it. I will have thought about it ahead of time. I will have given you options, and then we're going to narrow that over time. Right. And then, when we make a choice, we'll document that choice and move. Though establishing those working relationship norms over time, they happen by osmosis and kind of on the natural, like a river tumbling rocks. Eventually it rounds out all the edges, but that takes like a few thousand years. If this project's only 90 days, I ain't got 1,000 years to round out the edges. How do we do that? Kind of going up front and then update it as we go.
Well, and one of the things that you're alluding to is what I call the cheeseburger talk, right? Early on in an effort, I want to have a conversation one-on-one with the sponsoring executive. If there's multiple execs, I'm going to have multiple one-on-one conversations if I can pull that off. If I can only buy a couple of plane tickets, I got remote execs, I'll try to, this is a good excuse to do it because I want to have a one-on-one conversation. I call it the cheeseburger talk because I don't want to do it in your office. Your office has that wonderful admin who's the guardian to make sure I don't get in early. I do get kicked out promptly and might interrupt me 3 times for phone calls and you just got to sign this and there's a production problem and you got to leave. I'm going to do it over lunch or even better over breakfast, right?
Or even better, happy hour, but I won't go there. No.
That used to be the norm. I think that's
changed. That's changed. Yeah.
But I want to understand. Help me understand. What do you want? Why do you want it? What's the business value you're trying to squeeze out of this?
Yeah. What is the strategic intent? What does success look like? And then what does a failure look like, right? And what are things that annoy the crap out of you the last time you've done it? Those are such good questions.
Well, when do you want it and why then? Must be done January 1st. Was someone coming in New Year's Day to test it? How does the value change if I can't deliver till January 2nd?
What's the one you if it was $1 more but a day sooner, versus a day later and $1 less, right? Like those types of framing questions reveal the expectations.
Well, and it's a chance to really, it's a chance to, exactly to your point, to set those expectations. Help me understand, what do you want? When do you want it? What resources are you willing to invest? What's the value you want to get out of this? And I'll look them right in the eye early on and say, okay, so right now we think this is doable. If at any point I start having doubts about our ability to pull this off as defined, when do you want to know? And if I have that conversation early on, like you're saying, those norms can evolve over time. This puts me on the right path.
It gives us permission to engage. Yeah,
Exactly. And if we
outstanding.
change sponsors in the middle, change execs in the middle, I want to have this conversation with the new exec. And if I have multiple execs, I'm going to write down what they say. And if they don't all align, we're going to get all the liars in one room and walk through the multiple answers and try to sort it out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Payson, we could certainly go deeper on this. I really appreciate your time and sharing this culmination of experience. I love your definition of experience earlier, and wisdom with us all. And to make it even in a scary situation, how can you as a leader be more confident? And we can do, let's be also really clear. We can do every one of these things we've been talking about, and you can do it absolutely right, and you can still get your head bit off and your face shot. Like, so this does not remove the risk, but it reduces the risk. And if you've done this part and they still just constantly bite your head off, that in and of itself, that might be a clue. Now's the time to make, reconsider your employments. So like, just, you don't have to sit and suffer that forever. But to me, it's doing it with honor. It's doing it with respect and integrity. And that is the best anybody can do. So I'll do my best. This is the best.
Exactly right. Well, your choice is this. If I would rather you thought I was a liar or stupid, I'd rather you thought I was stupid and honest.
At least now, because later on you're going to find out that maybe I actually had something there. Payson, this has been super helpful. Thank you so much for being on the show. I do want to conclude. I know we're just a bit over time. If you've got like maybe 90 more seconds, there's a question I like to ask all of my guests, and I'd love to ask you this question. It can be related to the talk. It doesn't have to be. And it doesn't have to be everything. I know you have like volumes of knowledge in your head. So I'm just looking for one aspect. So no pressure here. But the question is for you, Payson, when you're working with somebody, middle career, and you see the spark of an unleashed leader in them, like what's one clue where you're like, that is a person that's unleashed, like they are ready to do the thing in the moments that they need to do? What would one aspect of that look like to you?
One of the big tests for me is, do they admit when they've made a mistake, and do they admit when they don't know something? That's a lot of points on that scorecard, because once you trust someone to tell you when they don't know or they're uncertain, you can trust them. That drives trust way up. It's like, okay, so I can rely on you to tell me. If you tell me you know something and you've told me before when you didn't, I can rely on that information.
That's brilliant. And I think the irony is people feel like to say that you made a mistake or to say that you're uncertain, I think the assumption is that that's going to reduce trust. And the fact is, not doing it will reduce trust. Doing it might actually, and more often than not does, increase trust.
Complete paradox, but I agree with you completely.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, what a great way to celebrate the experiences that you're sharing with us here today, Payson. So where can folks stay in touch with you? LinkedIn, your preferred? Are you on X, or, just drive by and knock on your window?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Payson Hall at LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. The nice
Great.
thing about having an unusual name.
Yes, exactly. You're not bearing into it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @Unleashing Leaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.